So for calibrating the monitor 5s, these are a lot easier than the earlier versions because now we have a touchscreen that kind of gives you a little follow along kind of methodology. So let's log in here real quick. Oops. Alright, so once we're logged in into a map screen here, make sure that your pendant is on, and then we'll click on the menu button there on the left corner, and then go down to calibration. And then from here, we're going to go to start calibration, and then we're going to flip the switch off. So now, we just pretty much followed the instructions that are on the screen, and press next. And right here it's indicating that you need to have your FMI pump in override. So make sure that the switches that are on the top of your FMI pump there are set to override. And prime the pump as necessary to get all bubbles out. Okay, so now what we're going to do is we're going to start the calibration process. So what we need is a clock, and we're going to just measure the flow for 1 minute coming out of the nozzle or out of the tube that we're measuring here. So let's start this, start the counter, and measure with our graduated cylinder. So we just let her fill up. As you can see right here, we have a pulses per second gauge. This is to indicate the actual RPM or pulses per second that the FMI pump is doing. Alright, looks like we got about 550 milliliters. So right now, we normally would enter this in ounces, and we could do the math if we needed to, but thankfully, when we type in the value, we can set it to milliliters. So we switch it to milliliters, we'll type in our 550 right there, and then press next. So now you'll hear that the pump throttle's down, because we're going to do our mid-cal rate. So again, what we're going to do is we're just going to measure for a minute what the flow's doing. So here we go, we're catching chemical in the graduated cylinder for another minute. And this is going to give us our mid-calibration rate. So what you notice is before where the pulses per second was probably upwards in the high 200s, maybe even low 300s, it's now dropped down into the low to mid 100s. The idea was that first high calibration where we got 550 milliliters. It's probably somewhere around 18, 19 ounces a minute, which in our case that's decent because the idea is at 10 mile an hour we're trying to target 8 ounces a minute. So at 20 miles an hour, which is usually where our cutoff is set, instead of 8 ounces a minute, we're going to be doing something closer to 16. Well, 18 is higher than 16, so that's a good calibration. If it wasn't, we'd have to readjust. And then we do the high calibration all over again. Alright, a minute has passed. And it looks like we got about 275 milliliters. So we'll just type that in here, 275, and press next. And now you'll see that the pulses per second drops down to the 50s. Somewhere whereabouts, and we measure again for 1 more minute. And all it's going to be doing in there is it's just going to be trickling. Not really all that much going on. The idea for the low calibration is to see kind of where the bottom end of the pump is. So if you're trying to spray it like 8 ounces a minute at 10 mile an hour, most people's cutoff speeds are somewhere around 5 miles an hour, half of 10. And so if 8 ounces a minute is 10 mile an hour, 4 ounces a minute is going to be 5 mile an hour. And so long as the bottom end of the pump can handle 4 ounces a minute, that's going to be a good cow. It's going to be within spec. A minute has passed, and it looks like we got about 120. So we'll type in 120 milliliters, and you'll hear that the pump has stopped. What it's indicating right here is to make sure that you put your switches back to where you found them before you started calibrating. And if you press next one more time here, we should see a linear slope here. Now in this line right here, there's a slight dip in the center going up to the highest point, and that slight dip is kind of what you want to see. If you have this thing curving in such a way that it looks like this, it's kind of an indication that you have air in the lines, so you might want to tighten your fittings or check your fittings, check the O-ring or the chemical bowl. But that's pretty much it right there. Once you press finish, the calibration's saved. And that's pretty much all there is to calibrating a Monitor 5. If you have any questions, don't be afraid to call your ADAPCO service technical reps at 855-782-3378. Thanks.